Prologue. Honestly, Mrs. Hadley, said Maggie McGregor, wiping her eyes, that sense of humor of yours will be the death of me yet. Jasmine Hadley allowed herself a rare giggle. The things I tell you, Maggie, it's lucky we're such good friends. Maggie's smile wavered only slightly. She looked out across the vast lawn at Callum and Seffi, her son and her employer's daughter. They were good friends playing together, real good friends. No barriers, no boundaries. Not yet, anyway. It was a typical early summer's day, light and bright, and, in the Hadley household anyway, not a cloud in their sky. Excuse me, Mrs. Hadley. Sarah Pike, Mrs. Hadley's secretary, approached from the house. She had shoulder-length, straw-colored hair and timid green eyes that appeared permanently startled. I'm sorry to disturb you, but your husband has just arrived. He's in the study. Kamal is here? Mrs. Hadley was astounded. Thank you, Sarah. She turned to Maggie. His fourth visit home in as many months. We're honored. Maggie smiled sympathetically, making sure to keep her mouth well and shut. No way she was going to get in the middle of another inevitable squabble between Kamal Hadley and his wife. Mrs. Hadley stood up and made her way into the house. So, Sarah, how is Mr. Hadley? Maggie lowered her voice to ask. Is he in a good mood, do you think? Sarah shook her head. He looks about ready to blow a fuse. Why? No idea. Maggie digested this news in silence. I'd better get back to work, Sarah sighed. Would you like something to drink? Maggie pointed to a pitcher of ginger ale on the patio table. No, thanks. I don't want to get into trouble. With obvious trepidation, Sarah went back into the house. What was she afraid of? Maggie sighed. No matter how hard she tried, Sarah insisted on keeping her distance. Maggie turned back to watch the children. Life was so simple for them. Their biggest worry was what they'd get for their birthdays. Their biggest grumble was that they had to go to bed. Maybe things would be different for them. Better. Maggie forced herself to believe that things would be better for the children. Otherwise, what was the point of it all? On those rare occasions when she had a moment to herself, she couldn't help but play what-if games. Not the big what-ifs that her husband sometimes liked to indulge in, like what if a virus wiped out every single cross and not a single knot? Or what if there was a revolution and all the crosses were overthrown, killed, wiped off the face of the planet? No, Maggie McGregor didn't believe in wasting her time on big global fantasies. Her dreams were more specific, more unattainable than that. Her dreams were all around one subject. What if Callum and Seffi? What if Seffi and Callum? Maggie felt a peculiar burning sensation on the back of her neck. She turned to find Mr. Hadley standing on the patio, watching her with the strangest expression on his face. Is everything all right, Mr. Hadley? No, but I'll survive. Mr. Hadley moved forward to the patio table to stand over Maggie. You were deep in thought there. Penny for them. Flustered by his presence, Maggie began. I was just thinking about my son and your daughter. Wouldn't it be nice if... Appalled, she bit back the rest of the sentence, but it was too late. What would be nice? Mr. Hadley prompted silkily. If they could always stay as they are now. At Mr. Hadley's raised eyebrows, Maggie rushed on. At this age, I mean. They're so wonderful at this age, children. I mean, so. Yes, indeed. Pause. Kamal Hadley sat down. Mrs. Hadley emerged from the kitchen to lean against the doorframe. She had a strange, weary expression on her face. Maggie felt nervous. She started to get to her feet. I understand you had a wonderful time yesterday. A wonderful time. Yesterday evening, Mr. Hadley prompted. Yes, it was quite quiet, really, Maggie replied, confused. She looked from Mr. to Mrs. Hadley and back again. Mrs. Hadley was watching her intently. What was going on? The temperature of the garden had dropped by several degrees, and despite his smiles, Mr. Hadley was obviously furious at something or someone. Maggie swallowed hard. Had she done something wrong? She didn't think so, but God only knows that being around crosses was like walking on eggshells. So what did you do? Mr. Hadley prompted. Pardon? Last night, Mr. Hadley's smile was very friendly, too friendly. We stayed home and watched telly, Maggie said slowly. It's nice to have a relaxing evening at home with your own family, Mr. Hadley agreed. Maggie nodded. What did he expect her to say to that? What was going on? Mr. Hadley stood up, his smile now a thing of the past. He walked over to his wife. They both stood just watching each other as the seconds ticked by. Mrs. Hadley began to straighten up. Without warning, Mr. Hadley slapped his wife full across the face. The force of the blow sent Mrs. Hadley's head snapping backwards to strike against the doorframe. Maggie was on her feet in a second, her horrified gasp audible, her hand out in silent protest. Kamal Hadley gave his wife a look of such contempt and loathing that Mrs. Hadley flinched back from it. Without a word passing between them, Mr. Hadley went back into the house. Maggie was at Mrs. Hadley's side in an instant. Are you okay? Maggie's hand went out to examine the side of Mrs. Hadley's face. Mrs. Hadley knocked her hand away. With a puzzled frown, Maggie tried again. The same thing happened. Leave me alone, Mrs. Hadley hissed at her. When I needed your help, you didn't give it. What? And only then did Maggie realize what she'd done. Mrs. Hadley had obviously used Maggie as an alibi for the previous night, and Maggie had been too slow to pick up on what Kamal Hadley had really been asking her. Maggie's hand dropped back to her side. I think I should get back to work. Yes, I think that would be best. Mrs. Hadley's look was venomous before she turned and walked back into the house. Maggie turned round. Callum and Seffy were still playing at the other end of the vast garden, oblivious to everything that had just happened. She stood and watched them, trying to capture for herself some part of the pure joy in each other. She needed something good to hold on to, but even the distant sound of their laughter couldn't dampen down the deep sense of foreboding creeping through her. What would happen now? That night, Maggie sat on the table, sewing patches over the patches on Jude's school trousers. Maggie, I'm sure you're worrying about nothing, Ryan, her husband, sighed. Ryan, you didn't see the look on her face. I did. Maggie bit off the thread and picked at another patch. Jude's school trousers were more patched than original material. The phone started to ring. Maggie picked it up before the first ring had even died away. Hello, Maggie McGregor? That's right. Maggie's sewing fell unheeded to her feet. It's Sarah Pike here. Maggie couldn't help but notice the apology already in her voice. How are you, Sarah? Finer. Okay, look, I've got some bad news. Maggie nodded slowly. I'm listening. Sarah gave an embarrassed cough before she continued. Mrs. Hadley's asked me to inform you that your services at the Hadley household will no longer be required. She will pay you 4 weeks' wages in lieu of proper notice, plus give you a good reference. Maggie's blood turned to ice water in her veins. Whatever else she'd been expecting, it wasn't this. Heaven knew it only wasn't this. She's really sacking me? I'm sorry. I see. I'm really sorry. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. Between you and me, I think it's grossly unfair. From one knot to another. It's okay, Sarah. It's not your fault, Maggie replied. She looked across at Ryan. His expression grew harder and tighter by degrees. Let him get upset. Let him be angry. All she could feel was nothing. A nothing that went way beyond the numbness enveloping every part of her body. Sorry, Maggie, Sarah said again. That's okay. Thanks for letting me know. Bye, Sarah. Bye. Maggie put down the phone. The clock on the TV counted out the silent moments that passed. That's the end of Jude's education, she sighed at last. But we promised we'd pay for him to carry on to school, Ryan said aghast. Pay with what? Maggie rounded on her husband. The leaves off the trees, the hairs off our legs, what? We'll find a way. How? We're barely managing to survive as it is. What will we do without my wages coming in? Jude will have to forget about school. He'll have to go out to work. You'll get another job, Ryan tried. Not with another Cross family, I won't. Do you really think Mrs. Hadley will stand idly by while I get another job with one of her friends? There was dawning horror on Ryan's face as he realized what his wife meant. Yes, exactly, Maggie sighed. She stood up and moved to sit next to her husband on the old sofa in front of the fire. Ryan put his arm around her. They sat in silence for a long, long time. Ryan, we're in trouble, Maggie said at last. I know, Ryan replied. Maggie jumped to her feet, her expression hard and determined. I'm going to see her. What are you talking about? Ryan frowned. I've worked for that woman for 14 years, ever since she was pregnant with our daughter Minerva. Seeing me is the very least she can do. I don't think that's a good idea. Ryan's frown deepened. Ryan, I need to get my job back, and I have to beg, then so be it, Maggie insisted, pulling on her coat. Her expression was hard now. It might have been carved in granite. No, Maggie. I don't like it any more than you do, but we have no choice. Maggie didn't wait for further argument. She headed out the door. Ryan watched his wife leave the house. No good would come of this. He could feel it. 2 hours later, Maggie was back, and that was the night that Lynette disappeared.